Hey guys, today we're going to be overcomplicating the air compressor system on my second gen Toyota Tacoma. Let's get this thing started. Now for those of you guys who are new to this channel is dedicated to all things DIY, mods, and engineering for your second and third gen Tacomas. And today we're going to be starting a multi-episode series on my onboard air compressor. And why, might you ask? Because I'm a mechanical engineer and I like to overcomplicate things to make them work as cool as possible. Emphasis on the cool factor. Cool. Now, I am just kidding, guys. Well, not really. But I do have a few good reasons as to why I'm going to do this multi-episode series. Number one, I do have front and rear air lockers. So those lockers do need at least 70 PSI for them to engage. And number two, we do inflate and deflate our tires pretty often, especially when we're going from trail to trail and hitting some highways in between. So my original air compressor setup, I've already had for about 2 years now at this point. And that was actually part 5 of my regearing series, if you guys haven't seen that video series yet. And for the past 2 years that I've been using this air compressor system, I do have several lessons learned. And my first lessons learned was I had my air compressor mounted directly to the bottom of the cabin. I had a little bit of rubber in between the two, but when that air compressor system was on, that thing would actually shake and reverberate throughout the whole cabin. So when we're doing radio comms, it's like nearly impossible to hear what people are telling me over the radio, or if I'm having to say something over radio, you can't hear it because the noise from the air compressor was just overwhelming. So with that, I am planning on putting the air compressor on proper rubber mounting isolators, and then also I will be putting some type of sound deadening enclosure around the air compressor to really kill the noise coming from that thing when it's running. So my lesson learned number 2 is that the initial pressure switch that came with that mini air tank was set to turn on at 90 and then shut off at 115. But I really only needed to turn on when it's below 70 because that's where the air lockers start engaging. So I did buy new pressure switches which will turn on at 70 and then shut off at 100. Therefore, that compressor will be off sooner. Now here are some further design consideration which will overcomplicate the whole situation. Number one, I still do want fully functional back seats because from time to time I have passengers and I want a system that allows me to quickly put up like bench seatings when I need. Number two, that storage underneath the seat bottoms is completely useless. Like you can't get anything immediately right underneath there. So I'm going to be using that space for mounting my air compressor and my air tank. And number three, I do really like that Morphlate system. And if you guys are not familiar, it's basically a system that allows you to inflate and deflate all 4 tires at the same time. Now, the only thing I don't like is you have like 50 feet of hose. So I think I will be eliminating the 50 feet of hose by using pigtails of shorter hoses that will be easily plugged into a quick disconnect system on both the passenger and driver side. But we'll see. You guys will figure this out with me as I try to come up with more crazy ideas. So with that, let's get to the truck. Now to recap some of my previous work, I did remove the air compressor, the tank, and the air manifold from its previous mounting positions that you see here. I have completely removed the rear seats and installed sound deadeners as well as this rear molly panel. And if you're interested in this rear molly panel, you can get yours from my store. It will be linked in the description below. All right guys, so here we are at the driver's side rear seat. This is really where I want to mount this air compressor. I took off the feet already and this fits real snug right under here. The only issue is I have to elevate it so that it's fitting at a 90-degree angle like this. And the other thing too is I did order shock mounts. So I'm gonna try to fab up a bracket real quick so that this can be mounted 90 degrees this way. And I'm going to basically have that custom bracket so that it's mounted onto the deck. So let's go draw something up in SolidWorks and plasma cut that bad boy. All right, now I got the brackets on there. Just dry fitted for now and test fitting it. Looks like fits all right. So this is where things get a little bit complicated. So I do have the studs coming off these shock mounts sticking right out. So the plan would be to just use those studs to kind of mark this sound deadener here and then just drill right into the floor. The other thing to be careful about is the gas tank starts somewhere like in this general area, like in the middle. But I do have about like an 1.5 inch gap between the bottom of this floor and the top of the gas tanks. So that should be definitely enough clearance to get the nuts underneath here. So let's get to that. So ran into a little bit of a problem here, guys. I got the studs to line up with the holes that I drilled, but since the clearances here are so tight, this piston head for the pump is actually interfering with this part of the bracket. So unfortunately, this design idea is not really working out as smoothly as I thought. So I thought up of a few ideas. Initially, I was gonna try to cut this bracket and bend it back, but it looks like it's laminated underneath with another sheet metal from underneath the flooring itself. And I don't want to do that because that's where the gas tank starts coming up. So that plan's not going to work. The other plan would be to redesign that bracket, since at least cutting and bending sheet metal is a little bit easier. So I'll basically rotate this air compressor maybe like 10 degrees in this direction, turning it so that this piston head is moving more upwards. I could see this portion downwards. So I'll just have to cut and rebend another bracket, and that seemed to be easiest since there is a little bit more clearance here in the front. So that's engineering for you guys. It doesn't usually work out the first time. All right, now let's test fit this bad boy. Look at that, second time's a charm, guys. Now we have much more clearances between the front and the back. Initially, when I had this idea and mounting it 90 degrees, the clearances on both sides only had about 1/8. So after further thinking, if I'm hitting some rocks and bouncing around, this thing will definitely slam around against the walls here. So turning it 45 degrees definitely gives it so much room. I wanted to keep this top section flush with at least the top section here, and that was really for ease of making a platform, but can't win them all. So I opted for the 45 degree. Now there's more room. I'll just have to build a custom enclosure for this. I'll pull this out again, paint those brackets, and should be able to hard mount this completely. So for those of you guys are curious to see the final design for this bracket, I did slot those tops so that these shock mounts can basically slide back and forth before I fasten them down completely. So the drilled holes doesn't have to be perfectly aligned. So slotting them was definitely a good idea, and having a double bend allows this to be completely stiff here at the bottom. So it stiffens the bottom, and the single bend on the side here stiffens the top. So once this is all set and mounted, this thing will be rock solid. And so that you guys can see, this is the amount of clearance that I did have right above the gas tank. So there's definitely plenty of clearance, enough to at least stick your hand under there and tighten down those nuts. And I did use a seam sealer in order to make sure that we don't get any water penetration into the floor of the cabin. Now we're here at the passenger side now, guys. This bracket is for the bottle jack, and I'm not using that bottle jack anymore. And let's be honest here, if I'm going to be having my fridge, my sliding fridge on this side, trying to get the bottle jack from underneath that platform will be a pain in the ass. So this will be removed, and I'll use this space to mount the buffer tank so that the air compressor isn't like triggering on and off all the time. So let's take this off. Going to be using an angle grinder to do so. All right, now we got that big monstrosity out the way. I'm just going to take sanding flaps and just basically round off these edges as best as I can. I don't really have to completely remove this thing. I just needed that feature to be out of there so I can kind of dry fit the tank. All right, dry fitting this. Yeah, that fits pretty well right there. I'm happy with that placement. Time to mark out and drill where we're going to cut those holes. Now here are the holes I drilled, guys. This is essentially to put these metal inserts in here, and I've already cleaned the areas with alcohol. So the only thing left to do now is to just paint over all those bare metal areas, including these brackets, then put in those threaded inserts. Now I am planning on putting down some sound deadeners on here once all this paint has fully cured. Paint's cured. I am throwing a bit of sealer on the rim just as an additional precaution so that we don't get any water in here. And I am using one of these threaded inserts in order to make our connection. Put the insert into the hole, making sure it's completely flat. There we go. These basically act as threaded holes. There we go. I'm gonna use my finger to kind of clean the seal around here. Here we are with the bottom portion of the seat for the driver's side rear. And I just did come up with an idea of using the existing hinges on the bottom here. Because why reinvent the wheel, right, if we already have this mechanism here that we can reuse. So I'm just going to basically take these two brackets off, and that's what we'll use as our main hinge point for the new platform. Now this bracketing system does have a marking on them, one that says in, one that says out, as you can see there. So I'll definitely have to take that into consideration when I'm using these. So here's the seat back for the driver's side rear, and let's figure out how to take this apart. There's two screws here that's currently visible, so I'll undo those. It's just two Phillips head screws. Well, let's see, that pries up this lower end. That looks like it's just snaps. Oh, there we go. So slid it forward, and that exposes the cushion underneath. Let's get rid of that. So I am definitely using this metal frame here, and we'll integrate that into the design. That's the mechanism to unhinge that seat back from the lock. And it looks like these are just essentially clips that's holding the fabric. So I'll go around with a set of pliers to undo those. All right, so we got most of this frame off, and it looks like it's still being held here in the upper section by the points where the headrest slides in. So that's what I'm talking about. These are the barbs that stick out. I had to push it in. I think I did overbend them, but it doesn't matter. I'm tossing these anyway. All right, so that removes this. So let's see what we're working with here. In order to have us use this as a working platform, I'll have to think about these steel rods that work as almost like a rib system. So maybe I'll cut them out. I don't know yet. I'll definitely not need these. Definitely want to keep this. So let's slap everything onto the truck real quick to see how much clearance and how things mate right now. So this is where the design gets a little bit complicated. Essentially, we want this to be like a bench seating. Now, in terms of the design considerations, I definitely want this to hinge in order to access the compressor, just in case I need to get into it. Now, some of the design restrictions here is definitely would want this to be a nice flat platform when it's on the down position. So we'll need to somehow be able to lock it in the down position. So when we're bouncing around in the trails, this doesn't just like flop up and down. So we'll also have to take that into account. I saw one of the suggestions from one of you guys, Beef Supreme. I know you mentioned using some type of locking mechanism on this, so I will definitely take that into consideration as well. Having like an electronically locking system for the back rests will keep these from getting into anything that you're storing on the back molly panels here. Forgot to mention, we do have plumbing that will be feeding this way towards the outside of the truck, and that will be for the air inflator system. So another complicated part of the design to add in there. But at least we're gonna start with the driver's side since it's smaller. We'll have to do the same thing for the passenger side. So that's pretty much it for today's video, guys. Definitely more to come as we try to tackle this very complicated situation. Now let me know what you guys think about this new placement for the air tank and the air compressor. I think it's a really great use of the space since we can't use it really for anything else. If you have any other further design suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below. Now, if you also have an air system already set up, let me know what you guys did in the comment section below too, because I'm always curious as to how people plumb and wire the systems. So anyways, stay tuned as we try to tackle this platform and this enclosure design ideas. So until next time, peace out everybody.